Two white officers arrested Michael Carter, a black man, framing him with planted evidence. What they didn't know was that Michael was a CIA operative, ready to expose their corruption. What happened next shocked everyone. But let's start from the beginning. Michael Carter, a 35-year-old African-American man, exuded a calm confidence as he navigated the quiet streets late at night. Dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, Michael carried himself with the poise of someone accustomed to high-stakes environments. His rented sedan, understated but clean, hummed steadily as he headed home from an important meeting. However, a small but significant issue, a flickering taillight, went unnoticed by Michael, but quickly caught the attention of Officers Jenkins and Murphy. The two white officers, notorious in the community for their confrontational style and racially biased practices, sat in their patrol car, scanning for anything, or anyone, that looked out of place. The sight of Michael driving through the neighborhood was all the reason they needed. With a quick exchange, they flicked on their lights, signaling him to pull over. Michael complied without hesitation, pulling the sedan smoothly to the curb. He rolled down his window, meeting the officers with a composed yet polite demeanor. "Good evening, officers. Is there a problem?" he asked. Instead of a direct response, Jenkins leaned in with an air of intimidation, firing off questions about why Michael was in the area and where he was heading. The tone was accusatory, the questions vague and leading. Despite Michael's clear explanations that he was returning from a meeting and staying temporarily at a nearby hotel, the officers seemed determined to escalate the encounter. Murphy circled the car, his flashlight scanning every crevice. "Step out of the vehicle," Jenkins barked, ignoring Michael's inquiry about the reason for the stop. Reluctantly, Michael complied, his instincts warning him that this was no ordinary traffic stop. Moments later, Murphy triumphantly announced, "Well, well, what do we have here?" He emerged from the trunk with a small zippered bag, unzipping it to reveal a stash of drugs Michael had never seen. His heart sank as the realization hit. The evidence had been planted. Cuffed and loaded into the back of the patrol car, Michael's mind raced. As a high-ranking CIA operative, this false arrest threatened not only his reputation, but also his covert work. Little did Jenkins and Murphy know, their decision would set in motion events they could never anticipate. Word of Michael Carter's arrest spread quickly through the police department, creating a ripple of excitement among the officers. Jenkins and Murphy, brimming with self-satisfaction, wasted no time boasting about their so-called big bust to colleagues in the precinct. To them, Michael was just another perp, and they reveled in the false narrative they had constructed. Their captain, impressed by what he saw as a substantial seizure, personally congratulated them for taking a supposed drug trafficker off the streets. Meanwhile, Michael sat in the holding cell, his demeanor calm and measured, despite the chaos swirling around him. He refused to answer any questions beyond basic identification, giving nothing away. Behind his composed exterior, he was carefully observing, mentally recording every word and action of the officers. Their careless overconfidence, sloppy behavior, and thinly veiled smugness would be crucial details for what he knew was coming. At the CIA, Michael's unexpected absence immediately raised red flags. A critical briefing had been scheduled, and his failure to check in was uncharacteristic. The agency, trained to recognize even the smallest irregularities, began a discreet internal investigation. His colleagues quickly pieced together that Michael had been taken into custody by local police, and the news set off alarm bells. Knowing Michael's operational significance, they moved swiftly to secure his release without exposing his covert identity. Back at the station, Jenkins and Murphy had no idea that the evidence they planted, the suspiciously pristine packaging and overly neat setup, was already under scrutiny. To the trained eye of CIA analysts, the scenario reeked of fabrication. When Sarah Jackson, Michael's fierce and highly skilled African-American lawyer, arrived at the precinct, her fury was palpable. A seasoned attorney, known for dismantling systemic injustices, Sarah was contacted directly by Michael's CIA supervisor. After meeting Michael in the holding cell, her anger turned to resolve. The charges were not only false, but insultingly blatant. Together, Sarah and Michael began strategizing, knowing they would not only need to clear his name, but also expose the corrupt practices at the heart of the case. This fight was no longer just personal. It was a battle against the entire system. The trial of Michael Carter quickly becomes a media spectacle, with headlines blaring about racial injustice, corruption, and the controversial arrest of a black man in an affluent suburb. Outside the courthouse, protesters gather daily, chanting for accountability and carrying signs that read, "Justice for Michael" and "End police corruption." The atmosphere is charged, the case becoming a flashpoint in the national conversation about systemic racism and abuse of power in law enforcement. Inside the courtroom, the prosecution lays out its case, presenting the evidence Jenkins and Murphy claim to have found in Michael's trunk. The drugs are shown in meticulously sealed bags, and the officers testify with unwavering confidence, painting Michael as a dangerous drug trafficker. The prosecution's narrative seems airtight, and their smugness grows as they anticipate an easy win. But Sarah Jackson, Michael's razor-sharp attorney, methodically dismantles their story. In cross-examinations, she exposes glaring procedural breaches, including the lack of a proper search warrant and the absence of required body cam footage. She highlights the implausibility of the officers' timeline, suggesting that their account was rehearsed rather than factual. The jury begins to shift uncomfortably as Sarah's questions leave the officers visibly rattled. Unbeknownst to anyone in the courtroom, the CIA has been monitoring the trial from behind the scenes. On the third day, Sarah drops a revelation that sends shockwaves through the court. Michael Carter is not just a civilian. He is a covert CIA operative. Gasps ripple through the gallery as Sarah presents evidence confirming Michael's classified assignments at the time of his alleged drug trafficking. The prosecution stumbles, their confidence evaporating. Jenkins and Murphy remain defiant, but their facade cracks when CIA analysts take the stand. They reveal tampered surveillance footage from the patrol car, proving the evidence had been planted. The final blow comes when a whistleblower from within the police department steps forward, testifying to the officer's history of targeting black drivers and fabricating charges. By the end of the proceedings, it's clear that Michael is innocent, and the real culprits are the officers who abused their power. The courtroom is left stunned, as the trial not only exonerates Michael, but exposes deep-rooted corruption for the world to see. The jury deliberates for less than an hour before returning with their verdict: not guilty. As the foreperson announces the decision, a wave of relief washes over Michael Carter. The courtroom erupts into applause, with supporters in the gallery embracing and cheering. The weight of months of accusations and public scrutiny lifts from Michael's shoulders. But as he sits quietly, his emotions remain conflicted. While justice was served for him, the damage inflicted on his life and reputation cannot be undone. Jenkins and Murphy sit stone-faced, their earlier bravado now replaced by the realization that their actions will not go unpunished. The judge orders an immediate investigation into their conduct, and within weeks, both officers face criminal charges for perjury, evidence tampering, and civil rights violations. The revelations from the trial spark national outrage, with protests and town hall meetings across the country demanding widespread police reform. Calls for accountability grow louder as activists and lawmakers push for an overhaul of policing practices. Though vindicated, Michael finds little solace in his victory. The ordeal has left scars, both emotional and professional. He reflects on the countless others who were not as fortunate, whose voices were silenced, and whose lives were shattered by similar injustices. Determined to turn his pain into purpose, Michael agrees to testify before Congress. Standing before a packed chamber, he recounts his harrowing experience, highlighting the systemic failures that allowed such corruption to thrive. His testimony is both powerful and poignant, drawing national attention to the urgent need for change. Michael's bravery inspires hope, becoming a rallying cry for those fighting injustice. His story is shared widely, sparking conversations in classrooms, boardrooms, and homes across the nation. As the chapter closes, Michael drives home in his own car, a new vehicle, symbolizing his fresh start. The streets no longer feel hostile, and he no longer carries the weight of fear. Instead, he drives with renewed determination, knowing his fight was not just for himself, but for a fairer future for all. Michael's resolve remains clear, to ensure no one else endures what he did. Truth prevailed, but his mission has only begun.